come off it. I think, especially for the black church, there's not enough dialogue that went on. If we think about the 1950s now to 2019, the church was the nucleus of the community. It's where everything started. So if you needed training, if you needed to know how to read, if you needed to learn how to apply your voting card, everything was provided in the black church. And now we've outsourced everything. And so we want to create a dialogue of how important it is that we get back to the nucleus of that. So as we were thinking a couple weeks out, prior to that, we both stated that we probably need somebody additional on the panel with us. And so she said, well, we need a millennial. And I said, great. And we said, who is that going to be? I was myself and Pastor Mom, we started throwing things out, and we don't really have an idea where we're going. And so then I reached out to Pastor Keisha. I said, whenever Pastor Dion will be available to come and be a part of this dialogue with us. And so we're going to just be talking about our open conversation. Really not so much solution driven, but just to create a conversation. All right, so we use for a title tonight, or a focus tonight. It's called Reclaiming the Voice of the Black Church. We feel like the voice of the black church must be reclaimed. So our first question is why don't we encourage self-care for leaders? And how should we plan self-care throughout our ministry and remain effective? And let me explain to you what self-care is. Self-care is taking time out for yourself. I know for myself, I can become a workaholic. I go home, instead of putting work down, I'm in the bed doing work. So sometimes I have to learn I don't know how to cut myself off. Because a lot of people that are in ministry, we're bivocational. We work a full-time job, and we do ministry full-time as well. So we thought about the term self-care, and I've had to reevaluate self-care for myself personally. Being a 3-time stroke survivor, I've had to reevaluate that. And so that's looked a lot different for me this year than it's looked in any other time. So I still haven't got that vacation that I need, but it's coming. But I think so. I want to ask that question, how important is self-care?
I'll start. First of all, thank you for allowing us to sit and be a part of this great movement that you guys are doing. But particularly self-care for me, I've had to learn, particularly for the benefit of my ministry, self-care, because when I was not operating in self-care, my ministry was suffering because my mental capacity was suffering.
Yes.
And so we as leaders, we as people, I wasn't taught self-care growing up, because, and I'm talking self-care, meaning like me as an African-American pastor, I tell my church all the time, I can only lead you through spiritual counseling. I can't lead you through any other type of counseling because I'm not qualified to do it. So I want you to go get help. Self-care.
Yes.
And we in the black church, we in the African-American church, we go against that. We absolutely we think it's the worst thing ever because it's how we were raised.
That's true.
So we weren't taught self-care. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents, our parents, they worked and they worked and they worked. And so for me, it's the way I grew up. But now I've had to learn that to be able to do effective ministry, I have to operate in self-care. My self-care may be going to get a manicure and a pedicure. I play golf often, whatever it is, whatever makes me happy, I do it, because if I don't, then my ministry is going to suffer.
Exactly. And we forgot to introduce our panelists.
I was going to let you go back and do it.
I was like, we forgot to introduce our panelists. I'm sorry. This is how we do the radio, y'all. So we just keep it real. This is Pastor Dion Clark. He pastors a very progressive church here in the city of Greensboro, Equation Church. Young, vibrant church. So if you ever get an opportunity to go to Facebook Live and just watch his church, what I like about him, I do get a chance to watch him in the evening. So in the evening, I get to go watch the pastors, because while we're in church, I get to go back and get clips in the evening. And he has a good message. And so I've enjoyed his message. I've watched him. I've followed him. Me and Pastor Lisa have had conversations, so we've got an opportunity to move from Mount Zion, as youth pastor to now to pastoring your own church. And so I think that's a great opportunity.
Yeah. And tonight we have joining us Pastor Justin Marshall. And he is the son of Bishop Freddie Marshall. And it's so funny because I remember him when he was a little boy, okay? And I know I look great. Thank you all so much. But it's so funny because now when I hear him deliver the word, you can tell that he has spent originally started in Winston-Salem, and the Lord led his father to launch a ministry here in Greensboro, North Carolina. And so we have Pastor Justin, and he represents the millennial type of the panel.
Yes.
Although I would like to think I'm a young, hallelujah,
Yes.
thank you, Jesus.
Yes.
Sometimes my son and my nephew remind me that I'm not so young. So we did want to have a dialogue that reached, through the age. And so that's what this panel is for today.
Yes.
Back to the question, because as African Americans, we grew up in church, and sometimes we thought of self-care as vanity. So we didn't really do it. It was like, why you spending so much time, looking at yourself? Why you spending so much time on yourself? And so it's being vain. And so I think it's a good question. I think it's a good dialogue to have about the self-care. I want to ask Pastor Justin, your father grew up in ministry. You've known him to be in ministry all your life. Did you ever see him neglect his own self-care?
Indeed, a
Okay.
lot. And I would like to add to the question specifically, self-care for the benefit of the ministry, but also for the benefit of yourself and family is most important. Growing up as a PK, a lot of our lives, if not all of it, involved or just involved. The space that they deserve, because you don't want them to neglect ministry because they feel as if you've given 110% there before you bring them what's left.
Yeah. So do you think that our congregation ought to promote self-care and carve out that time for pastors to have self-care? Instead of forcing on us, so we take it, or do we just say, hey,
Yeah,
all the time?
I definitely do. And, the African American church, the problem is, and those of you who don't know me, I'm as real as it gets, so I'm going to tell you the truth. And so this is not to be offensive, but the problem with the African American church is simply that if African American pastors take a sabbatical, it's a problem
Yes.
with the members.
That's right. Yes,
You know,
yes.
But with other ethnicities, they get 2 months a year, and,
Yeah.
and it's like, it's great, and they come back,
Yeah.
They still
but
got church,
we
everybody
miss
split down the
we
middle.
miss one Sunday, and the members don't show up.
Well,
And so for those, that's the problem why African American pastors cannot, because the culture of the African American church just says, if pastor ain't there, I ain't coming. That's why I tell my admin team, if I'm not coming, don't tell nobody.
Yes.
Because it should, because then we build church around the person and not around who we're supposed to serve. And so that's the problem that we have. And so to answer your question, yes, because the congregation learn, and those of you who serve in ministry, you have to encourage your leaders and your pastors, even those of you who sometimes we all don't feel like going.
That's right.
Even us as pastors.
Yes,
Some
right.
Sunday mornings, it's just like, God, why do I have to go to
That's
church?
right.
Yes.
But then those of us who serve, and think about this, you had a bad morning, you're struggling with your bills, you got an argument with your husband or your boo, and your kids cutting up, and you take that to church because you're not practicing self-care, then you blow up on everybody.
That's right.
So then the whole church is in frenzy
Yeah.
before worship even starts, all because we weren't practicing self-care. So I wholeheartedly believe that. And I just want to piggyback on something. I'm going to give it up to, back to you. Pastor Marshall, you said something so good because PK's have it hard. And so I have 3 children, and you know what I preach to my church is, don't be so deep that your children miss out on being children. Meaning, so when it's time for my kids to go trick or treating, we take them trick or treating. I know.
That's a whole other story. That's a whole other story.
But when it's time, you know, people say, Christians say, hey, Santa Claus, until they get to that age, like this is the first twins, that this first year, like, hey, it ain't gonna be a Santa Claus, mom and dad, but all the time we play that. Why? Because that's what I did growing up. And I think that I came out okay. And so I want them to be kids and not be stereotyped by what people have made church to be versus what God said it should be.
Yes. That kind of leads me into a question, though. He said something. Has the church moved toward a brand rather than a place that believes in restoration?
Yes.
So we focus on the brand, and the brand, what I mean by that is the pastor. So your focus is on the leader, which is the brand, as opposed to focusing on the church, the restoration.
I think one of the things that we have done, at least in this context or in our era, is we have become more brand driven than we are people driven. We do church well, but we forsake people. And people have to become the ministry again. They have to become the focus again, or at least the focal point. One of the things that I teach millennials is for us not to become so personality driven, let's stop focusing on everybody's gifting. And let's focus on our ability to serve the mission of Christ. And it's boring for some because all they want to do is look for a platform. All they want to do is look for a moment to shine. But once we get them back to understanding that ministry is ministry, it's work. It's about Christ. It helps us to not focus on brand. And I'm not against branding at all. I think in this particular generation, you need the brand to a certain degree. But you don't need to forsake your core values or at least your standards that help to shape a healthy culture.
And so the church, in my opinion, look at that from a standpoint of being rehabilitated. You know, when people have been incarcerated, they bring them out. Some of them will move into a halfway house, and then from there they'll move them into society. What I think has happened in the church is that we rehabilitate them to a certain point of functioning, and then we abandon them. And so we function at a level of dysfunction, and we've learned to do that so well that we have dysfunction, and people thinking that we're functioning, and we're really not functioning. And so when something happens in a church and we have a meltdown, and everybody's looking at you like, well, what happened to Pastor? What happened to him? It's because we tried to hold an image for people that we forget that we ourselves need the same embrace. October is Pastor Appreciation Month, that we label it, but I think all year should be Pastor Appreciation, not so much in monetary gifts, but you need to appreciate the gift that God has given you. That stands up every Sunday morning, that prepares a message to deliver to you, that's worked either all week long, and like he said, we're tired, we don't want to feel like giving up. I know last week Pastor Marcus asked me, you going to do all this G-Ho partying last week? She said, you going to be church on Sunday morning? I said, yeah, I'll be there. I went to intercessory prayer at 8:15 last Sunday. And so it's important that I think we have to understand, rehabilitation is good, but we need to make sure that there's some restoration that comes along with the rehabilitation. Because if not, we're going to lose people. And that's why I think having the connection between millennials and myself is really hard, because I think sometimes the conversations I have with millennials, to me, it seems foreign to me. Because some of the things that they focus on, I'm thinking, what did they just say to me? Because it doesn't make sense. But it makes sense to them in their culture. But to me, it doesn't make sense. I'm there. So now I'm learning it all over. I think myself and Pastor Mark had a conversation the other night we're talking about, they think
say this all the time. In order for you to be effective within your generation, you need to learn the language of that generation. You don't have to change you, but you at least need to know how to talk
Yeah.
in the era that you're in.
Yes.
You know, so I'm not saying that you know baby boomers and Generation X, you gotta walk around, you know, using slang. You
I
don't
was
have to-
saying, make that
you know,
plain.
yeah,
You're like, what's
yeah,
up?
yeah,
Like,
you know, you don't have to do that. You don't have to change your outfit, but I think you need to know the language of the culture that you're trying to create and the language of the generation that you're trying to reach. They do like church that is not 3 hours long.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean that they don't want to labor, but some of them are more interested in the service. And I'm not talking about the worship, because those are two different things. We enter to worship, but we depart to serve. And that's how we have to really see ministry. And that's how millennials, I believe a lot of them see ministry. They don't want to do 3 hours of church, but then they only do 30 minutes of service. You know, some of them are more community driven. And so we just have to be willing to learn the language of the generation that we're sent to. Once we do that, we can brand effectively. Hashtags are important because a lot of millennials don't read books.
No.
They don't read books, so they're not interested in 140 characters as much as they're interested in just a hashtag. You know, they want to know what the message is very quickly. So to answer your question, I think we got to learn the language of the generation that we're sent to.
Yes.
But in that, you know, in learning their language, make sure that we insert the message of Jesus Christ in everything that we do, you know, in everything that we do. And most important, being driven to the fact that a lot of them, they love worship, but they really want to serve people.
So can I just piggyback off that real quick? So equation right now, we are 62% of our membership are millennials. So 6.2 out of every 10 members that we have are millennials. And so I am a millennial, what I consider a millennial pastor. And so I wholeheartedly agree with everything that's been said. But if the church does not understand and learn millennials, then we'll lose the church. Because it's not that millennials don't want to come to church, it's because they don't feel like the church understands who they are. And so we as, you know, the baby boomers, older generation, millennials, our efforts to understand their context of what they need in the context of what worship is to them now. You know, we can't even do church now. Not being funny, like if churches are still doing the same thing they did in 2014,
Yes.
that church is gonna die.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
No, because you know, even biblically, like you know, he didn't perform miracles the same way every time.
You did not.
He did it differently. So that's the same as churches have to evolve. Churches have to move with the time. That's why churches have went to online streaming and online giving and those things like that. But we as pastors and we as churches, we have to learn how to embrace what millennials really, really need and learn how to embrace their language, because if we don't, then we'll be sitting in a church with nobody in them, because millennials are the ones who really want to come to church, want people to understand what they need from the church.
So how do we identify their needs? What's the, how do we know what their needs are?
Conversations. So like you have to have conversations with millennials. You have to talk to them like I am their pastor, but then I'm also I make it where they can come to me and be corrected in love without being judged and criticized and condemned. If they're coming to me to tell me what they did wrong, they already know they're coming wrong. So why do I need to take the hammer and say, you know, now don't get me wrong, you know, back in the day, some things like we would be sat down automatically, right? You know, fire, hell, brimstone, right? Let's just be real, right? That's the way we were, right? And some pastors like that, that's their choice. But I'm saying, like, you know, I've had to sit people down, but in the context of sitting them down, I also gave them a plan. To sit them down and then just leave them there.
Yeah.
That's the way we grew up. And then so it becomes a fit, but let's help them grow.
Yeah.
So you have to have serious conversation, and we're too busy.
Nephew, and he is a millennial, and And I had a conversation with him because we invite him to church, and the thing that he said is that it reminds him, like you said, of religion. And so he cannot identify with religious expressions of worship. And so even the praying out loud, things like that, that he said, you know, I feel like
we're not up there reading a bio. You know, it's introduction. We have this, we understand, like, we have this whole experience where too many times churches, to answer your question, churches, we do this. We start here, we go here, we back down here, we go here. Like people, we don't want to feel like we're on a roller coaster when we go to church. Our experience should start at a level and end at a climatic level that people's like, I cannot wait to get back there next Sunday. So that's your question. Get out of the traditional method and understand where church is now, but also make sure people understand. Because listen, I am as Pentecostal as they come.
Only because for many people that know, he's the senior pastor. I serve as an assistant pastor, so I'm not the senior leader. My father, who is from another generation. And so a lot of our staff meetings are centered around how we can merge this generation's choice of worship with this new millennial generation's choice of worship. So we still do traditional things such as communion, which we call Holy Eucharist, and we still have baptismal services and things of that sort. And pastors. They made us good servant leaders. And so I don't think we should forsake all of our traditions because they're still prevalent and they're still needed. Some of the things that we've done, and I saw we did it a couple of months ago, we had a week of consecration, and a lot of the millennials had never covered their head. A lot of the women, young girls, they were asking, they were like, why are we covering our heads? And one of the things that millennials need is they need answers.
Yes.
I'm going a long way with this, but I want you to get it. A lot of them to their seat to their seat. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to be okay with millennials asking why. If we become offended, we get to a resolution. And so I agree with Pastor, and I think that there, like I stated, some pastors that are graced to do a contemporary worship and a traditional worship. But then there are churches like ours who are graced to merge them. You know, we have lights, we have monitors, but we also going to pull out that Holy Eucharist table on first, wrapped in our collars, and we're going to cover our heads, and we're going to go to that table. Because there are some traditions that if you're not careful, if they're lost, then will lose stand from generation to generation. They standards, and that's something that we do lack. So I just wanted to throw that in.
I want to say something. I'm sorry. No, go ahead. No, do the guess. Go ahead.
No. So I want to make sure that we're clear, because I really appreciate that comment. Just because we're non-traditional don't mean we don't do things that have been traditional.
Yes.
So we have church, meaning like, Pastor Chapman will tell you, like, our service will stop in a deadbeat second and a straight out altar call. And so prophecy will go forth, laying hands will go forth. Like, if God says it, it's going to happen.
That's right.
But we have to stop forcing what God is not saying.
That's right.
And so too many times, that's where millennials get lost, because so many pastors and churches are forcing things on them versus giving them real answers to it. So we still do communion, but like, I may be dressed like this. Now, when I go to my spiritual father church, I better have on a collar, because it's just, and I also understand, for instance, if I went to Bishop Marshall's church, I would understand I wouldn't dress like this, because I understand the culture of the house.
Yes.
But we still, like, I took over, so you understand, I took over a building and changed the name that my grandparents pastored for over 36, 37, 40 some years. And so my grandmother, now she started every Sunday, she got to wear a dress, she got to do this. Now she's wearing t-shirts to church, and she's 84. So she understood, finally, she adapted to the culture, but she's still getting what she needs. So our communion table still comes out, it's still covered in white, but we may not wear collars. Sometimes we may, sometimes we may not. You know what I'm saying? Our baptism, we do that during service. But instead of singing "Take Me to the Water," my praise and worship is there. I mean, I'm just being real. That's no slight. I'm just saying we're just talking about tradition. This is no. I'm just saying for us, like, so for instance, our baptism is celebratory, so meaning our worship is like on 100, and so we're cheering and so. And what is our baptism called? What do I call it? Get fresh. So that's. I know, see y'all like that. So, our advertisement, like our baptism, it says get fresh, and we understand it's baptism. And so it's catchy, and so we baptized so many people this year and last year just because they understand. And guess what? We take them through the teaching. They understand what they're doing. They understand the why. They have to go through the class. They have to, but it's just how we do it and how we go around and bring it. So I absolutely think both, because sometimes I break out in an old school song, or I worship him because that's still needed. So you have to have both, because although I have 62% millennials, I can't forget about the other 48% that's out there
Yeah.
because those are the people that's paying the tithe.
That's the truth. Yeah, let's keep it real.
I don't want to be real. Those are people, millennials don't tithe. But they serve. And so that's what it is. So you have to be able to bridge both. So I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think and I feel, and there is a wave, and the church has to be ready.
Yes.
There's a wave that old school churches get ready to hit the scene because it's getting ready to come back.
I believe it.
Because the days of the old are needed for the times of the new.
Yes, I believe it.
And so we are getting ready to see this whole wave where some churches who have been stuck in total just out the box worship are going to have to come back and grab some of those older methods, and I'm coming to you, I'm done, just to make this happen. So that's what I say. So I just want people to know, like, we don't forsake the important things. We just do it in a modern way.
Yes. I want to say something that Pastor Justin said, is that millennials, they want to ask questions. And so with that being said, I want to challenge parents because we grew up where we didn't ask questions. If we were told to fast, if we were told to read, if we were told we had to wear a dress down here, we didn't ask why. And so what has happened is now we got a generation that does ask questions. So I want to encourage the adults to be prepared to answer those questions because the world always has an answer.
Always, yes.
And that's the thing, that they'll seek the world for their answer, and they'll have an answer right there. But you done drug your children to church every day, and when they ask you what is sanctification, you like, you don't know the answer. So with Maxwell, he will always ask me questions. I will always ask him, can I get my coffee first? But sometimes he will not let me get my coffee first. But and so with him asking. So it made me come back and say, first of all, it makes you, it's humbling because what you think you may not know.
Yes.
That's one.
Yes.
And then also it wakes you up to know that everybody didn't grow up the way you did.
That's right.
And everybody was not introduced to Christ the way you were.
Yes.
And so now hearing that millennials, they want to ask questions, we need to be prepared as a church.
That's right.
Not just the pastors, because guess what? They'll ask you in the pews before they get to us.
Yes.
And if they see you coming every Sunday, we should be ready to provide an answer the best way we can. So I love that they want you to ask questions.
And millennials also fact check you.
Yeah.
So while you're preaching, they're on Google to see. I'm serious. They fact check you. They fact check. So be careful saying what the Bible says if the Bible didn't say it.
That's right.
Yes.
So be careful saying that God said this in the Bible because they will fact check you every time. And so you have to make sure, because again, they want answers. And listen, don't be afraid. I tell people this all the time. Millennials are smart.
Yes.
They're smart. There's so much more out there now for them that is read, they can research. So it's okay to admit that millennials may be smarter than us. It don't mean they have more wisdom.
That's right.
It just means they're smarter based on the resources that, all we had was encyclopedias.
That's right.
Y'all remember that?
Yes.
That's all, when I needed, Google wasn't around when I was in downstairs and you picked the A out, you want to find out about, worship. Now all they can do is go on their smartphones, go to Google, search it in, and everything they want to know. So, we just have to be prepared. Understand that it's okay because they just want to know that they are being taught the right things.
Yes.
And they're not being forsaken. I appreciate that comment because a lot of your millennials, we think, I went to another church. I was invited to speak at a millennial conference, and it was really a youth conference. And I was helping them to understand your millennial age, they're not your teenagers.
That's right.
millennials, they have babies now. I'm a millennial, but I have a 2-year-old son. I have a wife. You know, we're no longer your little kids on the shun sign band choir. Yeah. We're not that. You know, we are your leadership in your church, and it's important because, and that's why it's important that we push the education of the pool material so that they can be prepared to lead doctors and lawyers that will come looking for spiritual advice, not just have charisma. And so one of the things that I would press and that I would push is that we become okay. Executives now sitting in our pews. It's not just people around the corner that you know your blue collar workers. Nothing wrong with that. But now you have CEOs that come, you know, people that own businesses, and you can't just shout them all day. they want substance. It can't just be charisma. There's nothing wrong with dancing. Anybody that knows me knows I'll dance in a second. You know, but after the dance, we have to have some direction and some type of strategy. So
I often tell my students that I'm a professor of theology, and one of the questions that came up was over. She went and caught herself chastising the little girl for what the pastor had instructed her to do. So when she found out that the pastor asked her to do that, she said, I felt so ashamed. She said, because I'm not into technology like that, so she thought it was a sign of being disrespectful. Wow, yeah. And she didn't realize, and the pastor realized that she said that she was losing her youth. So what she did, she put her on the pulpit with her. She intentionally did that. Had her do, so she was doing this, and she had her phone up, and she said she was so disturbed the whole service, she couldn't even get the word because the young teenager, she was watching the young girl. She didn't know what she was doing. She thought she was taking selfies and everything, but she didn't stop that. But what she didn't realize is that this is a generation, so we have to embrace technology. We've got to embrace thinking. Yesterday we were at Winston-Salem State's homecoming, and so the young lady said, well, I want to go on Snapchat and like you. I said, what is Snapchat? Winston-Salem State's homecoming. I don't Rams. Yeah, you know.
Oh, you big.
You get red and white people. Get red and white people. And so she said, well, can I go on Snapchat and find you? I said, is Snapchat an app? I mean, what is
My
that?
son won't let me get on Snapchat.
So, because places and stuff,
I think
I didn't know.
it don't last. The thing about Snapchat, it goes away, I believe. Once you say something on there, it goes away.
Oh, okay.
So Maxwell won't let me get on Snapchat.
So I didn't know how. So Instagram and Facebook. And she said, oh, okay. She said, well, y'all need to move. I said, well, I have to get somebody to do one-on-one. I don't even know. Pastor Marcus worked with me on just something on Facebook. I'm pushing buttons, and we don't realize I'm already talking. But I want to ask this question here that I think is that how do we rebuild walls that were designed to keep the enemy out? And we focus on a building. We have church, we have a building fund, and what we don't realize is this: the church changes the world changes every 4 years. The world only makes a change. The church only changes every 20 years. The world makes a change every 4 years. So by the time we get to 2020, there will have been made 4 major changes, and we're still behind. So now that we were finding, and if we go all the way back to the civil rights movement, they have a justice movement in their churches. And now we're talking about Black Lives Matter. We're talking about these different things that's going on in our society and in our culture. And if we don't talk about them from the pulpit, and we don't teach about it in Bible study, then we're going to lose some. I have a friend that pastors a church in Augusta, Georgia. It's about 2,500 people. He called me one night. He said, Erica, my Bible study is dying. He said, I don't know what to do. Nobody's coming. He said, they're short on Sunday morning. And I simply said to him, you're teaching Bible study. Stop teaching. Like y'all got quiet. It's like it's crickets on the phone. He said, Erica, I'm mad because you said stop teaching. I said, because you're not a teacher. Stop teaching traditional way of Bible study. So I gave him I train leaders. Part of my in my dissertation. I go to church and I train leaders. And I often make them think outside the box on how to reach them. So I said to him, do y'all still have Sunday school? Now I know some of y'all still like Sunday school. In my opinion, needs to be moved out of the way because it's not effective. I'm going to tell you why Sunday school is not effective. Because you are using evangelical material that was not written for our culture. It was not written for our population. So when you look at your Sunday school book with that little white church on the front, come on, let's be real. The little Sunday school book y'all get, that Siri said God is this. Google says this. And so now we're looking at rebuilding. How do we rebuild something? And we don't, so now we're starting from bottom down. We're starting from bottom up. We don't have a manual on millennials. So what we're doing, we're gleaning from them on how to build this, how to do this, how to do this. So I often tell my students all the time, you have to think about church from a different lens than the way you see it. I'm 46. So if I have a student in my class that's 72, she's not going to see it the same way that I see it. Because that's a whole other generation. And so, but what you have to embrace the fact that change is necessary. And I often use this to them. Today, I might not have had a crook in my big toe. But tomorrow, my big toe might be hurting. That means you're changing. You might have got a catch in your hip today. You didn't have no catch yesterday. You're changing. Every day we get up, change is happening, whether you want to embrace it or not. So how do we help rebuild the walls that we put up in our churches? Not so much a physical wall, but or that partition that keeps us divided.
Wall that the church has put up. What exactly do you put up?
I'm talking more so about traditionalism.
Okay.
The Bible says traditional means we make the word of God a non-effect.
Okay.
And what happens is instead of engaging them in our message. And so I told my friend teaching Bible study, rearrange Bible study. So do Sunday school on Bible study night.
So let me say this. There's so much going in my head based on what they say. So let me say the way that you tear down the walls is you have to stay ahead. So right now, I'm already in 2023, in 2019.
Wow.
And so great leaders have great vision. And so those leaders, and if you're a leader in whatever, Pastor Shaq, because I'm sitting here like they like, Pastor, we can't do this. Well, we better start having conversations
Yes.
about it, because if not, that the walls have to be torn down, because right now I understand that it's a part of the evolving times. And to speak on Bible study, listen, kingdom group. Our men may have a golfing kingdom group. Another set of group may have bowling kingdom group. They may, whatever you ask the people, you survey your people. What are things that you like? You like to shop, play golf, you like to bowl, you like makeup, you like to read. Whatever it is, find a small group because that's how you grow your church. Because if I bring somebody from work, hey, you should come to me to Starbucks. Our kingdom group tonight, we love coffee, we love
going from podium leadership to roundtable leadership. And that's just simply us understanding that everything won't be caught on a Sunday morning from the pulpit to the pew.
Wow.
There are some things that will be caught around tables, in conversation, through dialogue. And so I think that's how we tear down some of the walls. We go from podium leadership to roundtable leadership. It's okay for you to survey your people, their opinions. It doesn't mean that they change the route or the vision that God has given you, but you at least understand that their opinion is valid to some extent because they are serving with you. They're not just serving you, but they're serving the vision with you. So.
And so as we kind of close to bring this thing to an end, one of my last questions I sent everybody is, what do we feel as if, and I have to always catch myself, being a professor, I can use big terms. And so I have to really catch myself on using terminology so I won't sound in the classroom as opposed to allow myself to be amongst the people. So I posed the question, what is the prophetic proclamation in 2020? And so Pastor Moffitt and I sat down. How do you feel like, what do you sense God is shaping 2020 to look like for the church and reclaiming the voice that we've lost in the black church and in our community? Because there is a divide between the community and the church. We have churches in black and those people living in the community won't even come to that church. It's because we don't outreach in those communities. So we'll go across town to outreach to somebody else, but we want to affect the community where our church is located. So how do we do that? What do you all hear God saying for 2020?
I know for me, just through prayer and meditation, a time where we can really go back to wisdom, having an appetite for wisdom. It's not just about being smart, but it's our ability to, and our capacity, and I hear wisdom, to fight for the unknown, to really go beyond what we know, for what we don't know. Because the things that we don't know, the things that we have not seen, those are the times that we're coming up on. And we need strategy for what's about to happen. We need strategy for what's about to take place. Not just in church, but even in your personal life. Because we don't incline our ears and our hearts to listen. And so for me, 2020 is really going to be a time where I talk less and hear more. I dialogue less and pray more. I go out less and I consecrate more. Not 2020 is not the end. You know, if we and we don't know the day or the hour, but we have to really be concerned about 2020 not being the end or 2019 not being the end. We always need to be prepared for what's coming.
Yes.
So for me, it's really just us inclining our ear and our hearts to the Lord, so that we can know what to do, so that we can discern the times and know what to do.
Wow. I really feel like God is really saying that 2020 it's going to be the year of the restoration, not only in our personal lives, but in our families, in our communities. And what I mean by the year of release, some of us have been sitting far too long on what God has given us. And God is saying that it is time for you to come forth, come from behind the curtain and show who we really are. And so that God can be glorified in the gift that He's placed inside of you. So I really believe that God is going to do a new thing in us, but we have to embrace the change. 2020, you look at it, do not have 2020 vision. We have some type of corrective lens that we wear, if it's not glasses or contact, that helps adjust the vision. So I believe what God's going to say in 2020, He's adjusting our vision to see clearer. And I believe what Pastor Justin said, we need strategies. We need to come to the table. We need to give a strategic plan, a systematic plan of where we see God taking us. Because if we don't plan, we're going to fail. So I believe that God is setting us up for a great release in 2020. But we will miss God's ear if we're focusing on the wrong thing. So ask God to give you clear vision for 2020. And He said, give you an ear to hear what the Spirit wants to say. Because I believe God's even speaking now for 2020. You just have to have your ear to Spirit open to receive. But I really believe that God's going to release a new anointing, a refreshing that's going to come to the church like never before. I believe the restoration that we've seen is going to be much greater. I see God building families together. I see God doing it's almost like a citywide reunion where He's going to bring us together as the kingdom of God. We built churches, but I want us to have a greater crusade, a great revival. You know, it talks about the great expectation. Back in one of my classes, we talked about the great revival that went on for years. And they would go from town to town, city to city. And the revival, and they would go by foot. And so, as he said, I believe traditional has to come, but I really believe we've got to embrace the mind and the heart of God in a new aspect. And don't limit yourself to where you currently are. Don't limit your perspective where you are. Because where you are right now, you look a whole lot better in the future than you do right now. And so you got to embrace the change because God has something greater in store for you on the other side.
Amen. Amen. For 2020, I believe when you say reclaim, the thing I feel in my spirit is that the Lord is going to reconcile His people.
Wow.
He's going to reclaim those that are lost. And so I see in 2020 that the Lord is going to, that He's going to cause the churches to come in line, to cause those that have strayed away, that has fallen away to come back to Christ. I'm expecting for a mighty revival to take place in 2020. I'm expecting for those preachers that are backslid to come back to Christ.
Yes.
I'm expecting like evangelists and prophets and but one thing that's also going to happen, the Lord is for me, it's going to be in the home. When you talk about reclaiming the voice of the Black church, I think the voice in the home has to be reclaimed. Wow. And so the Lord is going to start to raise up the people in the home that they're going to be able to reconcile their children, their spouses. And so all of that lines back to church.
Yes.
And for so long, we have disconnected the two. We have put church over here and your home over here.
Wow.
But God is going to begin to marry the two because they're both a ministry. And they're both what the community needs. They need to see a healthy home and a healthy church.
Wow.
And we've been unhealthy for so long, not just in the church, but in the home.
Yes.
So I believe that God is going to reconcile His homes. He's going to reconcile families. And that's going to drive them all the way back to church, to the cross.
Wow.
And so whenever we begin to yield ourselves, and I just believe that clarity, everybody's talking about 2020, I believe in clarity.
Yes.
For a long time, we have been walking around like this, feeling our way through life.
Yeah.
We're like bumping in the walls and everything, like, oh my Lord. reclaiming the voice. Reclaiming the voice. I feel like part of the voice was lost because we didn't have clarity. The church, we didn't know where to go. We didn't know what to build. We didn't know how to hear God. That's how we fell into tradition.
Yes.
Because we begin to do what other stuff.
Yes.
But I believe part of reclaiming the voice is getting that clarity from God, and it's going to start in our homes with our families. And I believe that once we begin to ask the Lord, like Pastor Dion said, what is the vision for your house? You know, what is the vision for your wife? What is the vision for your spouse? What is the vision for your children? And then you all worship together in church with one mind, because the vision for the house has been set.
Yes.
So now you got all the children praising God for a new house.
Yes.
Because your mama done sat the kids down and said, this is what we're going after.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is what's reclaiming the voice, because for so long our voice has been diluted behind so much other stuff. But I believe 2020 is going to bring clarity in the home, and it's going to draw a line back to the church.
That's good.
And that's going to marry the community, because we can't worship in our churches every Sunday and walk past our community.
That's right.
And that's the thing that I say all the time. We get angry when we see people buying up our communities.
Yes.
But when they ride down the street, they see something that needs to be fixed. I believe in 2020 that the Lord is going to raise us up to rebuild our communities.
Yes.
So when they look over there, they don't see something that's run down and needs to be fixed, and they're the rescue, because they're going to see us building our own places. And whenever we get into focus with God, there's no way, I say every time, God cares about the whole man.
He does.
He don't just want me to be a good pastor and a terrible mother.
Yes.
He don't want you just to be a good lay member and you go home and you're a terrible spouse.
Yes.
And so God don't want us to care about if our churches are built up, when our communities are going down, when we're losing our black boys to gun violence, when we're losing our next generation.
Yes.
You know, he don't want us just to make sure our churches are built from the ground up, and our houses and our communities and our elderly and our mentally ill are wondering and fending for themselves. So when you talk about reclaiming the voice of the black church, I believe it speaks to the whole man. And it goes beyond the four walls of the church, but it goes to the whole man. Because we are, whenever we get that in our minds, that it's not about a building, but it's about ourselves. And so 2020, I believe that the Lord is going to reclaim. When you say reclaim, he's going to go after those that are lost, because they're needed for the kingdom. Yes, they're needed for the kingdom. And I'm excited about it. Yeah, that's good.
So for me, and just particularly just without saying too much and saying enough, and I say that meaning not just for my church, but just for the people. 2020 is the year of accessibility. Accessibility and audibles. And what I mean by audibles is God is going to give us access to things we've never had access to.
Wow.
And so to piggyback on everything they've said, you know, a lot of times we're afraid to walk through a door because we don't think we have access to what's behind that door.
Yes.
But in 2020, as it relates to everyone's, talking about perfect vision, part of seeing is to be able to see beyond where you are. And so a lot of times we can't see beyond where we are because we don't think we deserve access. But I said something last week and our team put it out there. God is about to give us access to things we didn't even deserve.
Yeah.
And this is the year where he's not just going to open doors, but he's going to open gates. And so when we understand that, I told my church that, accessibility and audibles, that like Tom Brady, the quarterback for the Patriots, he's good because he's able to see and call an audible and change the play in a matter of seconds. God is going to give us a discernment and the wisdom as kingdom, as leaders, as people for our house to be able to call audibles to get the access to score in 2020.
Wow.
And so because when he gives us the access and he gives us the discernment to call audibles, then we're able to beat the enemy at the enemy's game. We're able to win. We're able to score. And so I believe that from that standpoint, that's what we do. And, and I just want to say this real quickly. Understand also that we have to be all in. I told our admin team this morning, we have to be all in, and God is requiring all of us to be fire starters. Like find out why your fire went out.
Wow.
Find out how to be ignited. In Acts 28, where Paul, he had the fire on his hand, right? And it bit him, But then I asked God the question, God, why did he throw the snake back in the same fire that bit him? And it's because if you do your research, understand, because once the snake bit him, he had people around him to help start a fire. So the fire that the snake came out of that bit him, it wasn't the same fire he threw the snake back in, because he had other people. In 2020, God is going to supply you with people to start new fires around people like snakes who've already bit you, where you'll be able to throw them back and leave them alone. We got to understand, again, I talked about insecurity. Understand that when he threw the snake back in the fire, the snake could not return because the fire was different the second time around. Because of who helped him build the fire. So as we relate to that, understand, people will always, watch this, people will always, watch this, come after you. You'll always have snakes. They hurt you. Who cares? Ask God to help you get over it. Watch this. Because, listen, they're behind you for a reason. And so because God put them behind you for a reason, that means you have to move forward in what God is giving you access to. So 2020 is going to be the year of access and audibles.
Wow, that's amazing. So I just heard the Spirit of the Lord say, you have been granted access. Full access. And guess what, guys? I believe this was a prophetic, divine assignment for us for to be here tonight. I believe God set this on assignment. I believe that what we started tonight is a movement. I believe that you're going to see a different language spoken. I believe tonight that when you leave here tonight, you're going to be able to see God in a different perspective. You may have come here with one idea, but you're going to leave here with a different idea tonight. So we want to make sure, it was our desire that we set a fire, that we ignite some things on the inside of you, and you leave here tonight stronger than you were when you walked through the doors on tonight. Our desire is to do that. And so, and it's kind of funny that at Overcoming Deliverance Center, I preside most Sundays, and I always hijack the service after the time to do the offering. So I told I'm going to start hijacking the service and just let it go. So, we got some, I'm not going to hijack the service, but the same thing when the Spirit of God moves, we move with the cloud. And wherever God takes us, if He takes us into the prophetic, I'm laying on hands, because our desire is that when you walk through those doors, we want you to leave there set free. I don't want you to ever come to my house and feel heavy. I don't want you to ever feel hungry in my house. I don't want you to ever feel cold in my house. I want you to feel comfortable when you come to my house as if you've been here all for the rest of your life. So when you come to my table, I want you to be full. I don't want you to leave there empty. And so what we started a movement tonight. And I am grateful for the opportunity to have us come in to start a dialogue that I believe was much needed. And I had released the book in February, and the title of my book was, what's the title, y'all? Forgot. Return to the Black Church, an open letter to the Black Church. Wow, I just forgot the title. And in the book is not a solution; it's to start a conversation. And if we can start having more conversations at the table, I believe we'll see something. I remember growing up, they called us the Brady Bunch because at our table, we sat at the table and had dinner. There was no TV on. We would talk. We would talk about what happened that day. We would laugh. And the TV wasn't even in the same room whenever because growing up, we didn't have TVs in our bedroom. I don't know about y'all, we didn't have TVs. But Mom and Dad had TV, we had one TV where everybody else could watch. But we grew up at a table and we got to talk about our day. Now, because of technology, we've lost the art of communication. But so now if you go in a restaurant, you see this. Each other. So when people talk to me, I tell them, look at my face. I want to see your eyes. Because I grew up in an era that when you communicate with each other, I look you in your face. I don't want you to hold your head down. I want you to look at me. Because I want to see your reaction, your expression. So I am grateful for Pastor Justin, Pastor Dion coming tonight. Let's give them a round of applause.